Hello there, welcome to this video. We are looking at day 2 of the finals between Levon Aronian and Teimour Radjabov. Airthings Masters, the second tournament of the Champions Chess Tour. And well, day 1 went to Radjabov, as you probably already know. He won the last game, first 3 were drawn. So Aronian needs to level things up here on day 2. And he starts with the white pieces. We are going to dive right into the game. He opened up with e4. Just like on day 1. We have e5, knight f3. Just lower the sound here of the moves. Knight c6. Bishop to c4. We have the Italian. The last game he lost. He played bishop b5. We had the Berlin Wall. So this time Aronian goes for the Italian. Quiet Italian, gioco piano. Castles, d6, bishop to g5. And now Radjabov plays h6, kicking the bishop right away and kicking it even more with g5. Now this does offer white the chance to take on g5, and it's always a question if you should or if you shouldn't. I think the consensus in this case is not to take. I think it's established that if black is well prepared, he should be able to repel any kind of attack. It seems like white has 2 ideas to put pressure on this knight, but it seems like a key idea, and if you play the Italian, this is probably a good idea for you to know. The key move seems to be in many lines to play rook h8. And for instance, computer wanted to push here, and after something like this, the knight will reroute to d7, something like this. Okay, let's say white wants to come over here, but this looks like a key maneuver to play rook h7, and then eventually we will unpin. And yeah, if we come in with a jack, we can go to h8, and the rook provides shelter for the king. Another very cool idea is after king g7, if we go back, white goes for king h1, intending f4. Looks logical to open the h file. Here, rook h8 is absolutely key, and it's a very sneaky move, because if white plays f4, which looks very dangerous, I mean, we're just threatening to take, opening everything up, white is lost immediately. Can you A, believe it, or B, see it? I'll give you one sip of my crystal carbonated water while you find it. This was in no way, shape or form sponsored by this drink, but I hope you saw it. Rook takes h2. And it's just game over. GG. Nothing to be done. And yeah, so a very cool idea to know. So bishop g3. Bishop retreated, a5. Otherwise, white might think about expansion on the queen side, and it's always useful to get a square for the bishop. So a5, rook e1, rook e8, and we have some typical Italian game maneuvering here. Of course, this is not completely typical with the pawn here and the bishop, but nonetheless, white wants to target these squares and goes for knight e3. First, he avoids the trade, and then goes knight e3, a4, still avoiding trades, knight g6, queen c2, and now the knight jumps into f4. So black utilizing the fact that these 2 pawns provide good coverage for the knight. Rook a to d1, everything is centralized, and now things start to happen. Both sides have maneuvered. White has connected the rooks, placed them on the central files. All the pieces are out. Aronian decides it's time to strike, and he does so with pawn to d4. Radjabov takes. Aronian takes on f4. Now if you were to take this, and the bishop takes, white is probably happy. He got rid of this bad bishop here. But what happens after g takes f4? White is not going to take on d4 when this pawn could be hanging, but he's going to play e5. Amazing stuff. utilizing the fact that he can play this. But here, Radjabov could have refuted the attack. And, well, let's first see what happens, because we have to see what happens to see the difference. And in the game, Radjabov took on e3, d takes on e3, queen g6 check, king went to h8, queen takes h6. He had to go to h8, otherwise we would have taken here with check, followed by this. Knight h7. And now bishop to d3. And afterwards, Aronian said this he was very happy with this game and said this reminded him of a game that Bronstein played against, actually Spassky played against Bronstein, where Spassky sacrificed a rook. Bronstein could have taken a rook with check, just like in this game. Takes. And here we have a critical position, which we'll come back to. And white is winning here. He should be winning at least. But let's see what Radjabov could have done. So we have to go back. So this is the key position here. And in the game, Radjabov played bishop f5. We'll come back to this position, but I just want to show you after takes, f6, and queen here. So we have a pawn here, and this is actually important. We'll go back now. Hopefully this is not too confusing. But going back to this position, Radjabov played d takes e3. He could have played pawn to d3. It's not immediately apparent why you should do that, but it will become apparent. So queen takes d3, pawn takes e3. Now if we go for the same line, check, knight h7, bishop d3, we give up the rook, king f1, we take the rook with check, and rook takes e1. So this is exactly the same position as we had in the game, and I'll actually go now to the position where white took with the rook. And you'll see a difference. And it's only this, the pawn on f4. So by playing d3, you could take with the f-pawn and get rid of it. And that's actually better for black, to have this position with no pawn than to have this position with a pawn. And this is sometimes the beauty of chess. Sometimes it's better for something not to be there. And that's the case here, because black could now play f5 or f6 to block. We take, and queen f7. In the game, white would now have knight g5, because there was a pawn on f4. But with no pawn on f4, we can take with check. So the pawn would have been in the way, and with a pawn on f4 we could just mate, but no pawn, there's check, and now there's just a trade, and black is completely winning. So d3 would have refuted this attack. Another point is, if you try to, if you realize, my king on f1 is going to be in check, so I'll go to h1. Guess what? We can still play f5, because en passant is no longer possible, because queen takes e1 check, and followed by checkmate. So this would have been something else to find this, pawn to d3. But the Radjabov didn't, so we had this position with a pawn on f4. And here it's very difficult to defend. We've established that if black plays f6 or f5 immediately, white will take it. We can't take, there's no mate here. And if queen f7, we can play knight g5. So now this, there's no check, so this is mate. So black just loses completely. For instance, here, we simply go here. And yeah, there's nothing black can do. This is actually after, if we take on e8 first, let's go back, queen f7. If white takes first on e8 and plays knight c5, and then takes on h7, it doesn't seem to be a defense for black. Like queen c4. No, wait, do we have to call an ambulance? The king has no squares. Up and check. Yep, we have to call an ambulance. Call an ambulance. But not for white. because bishop d3, and it's check to the black king. Sorry, my game over. So black can't play f6 or f5 because he loses. So what to do? Well, Radjabov found a very nice resource, bishop to f5. And okay, what's the difference? Well, we can't also it in the perhaps not so successful ambulance joke. f6 takes queen f7. Now if you play knight g5, now we need an ambulance for white. Whether he has taken on e8 or not, the king has no squares, and white actually loses. So, in this position, great care was needed. It's still winning. Aronian played rook e6, which actually spoils a very nice game. He could have played rook takes e8, rook takes e8, and then, being a rook down, play the very calm move, pawn to b3. Just taking away the c4 square, the c4 check by the queen. And black simply has no defense. This is just coming in. And there's nothing to be done. Believe it or not. So yeah, unfortunately, Aronian did not find this. He played rook e6. And now Radjabov should have been winning after rook takes e6, knight g5. He gave up the queen, but white has given up so much material that black has two rooks and the bishop for the queen. But what ended up happening was Aronian gave a bunch of checks. Radjabov defended, more checks, check, and they repeated. Here's the second repetition. And after king g7, we can repeat again. But it looks like, I haven't analyzed this deeply, but it seems after rook f6 that black is escaping the checks. For instance, queen g4, king h6. And now we have to check on h3 or h4. And in both cases, it seems like, let's go with h3. Seems like we can run here to f8 and the checks are running out, and once we can get the pieces into the game, this should be good for black. But instead, after queen e6, Radjabov played king g7, queen e5, and a threefold repetition. So we had a draw. Quite a stunning game, and Aronian was very happy with it. Perhaps they didn't know about this refutation with pawn to d3. Very nice resource. But nonetheless, the idea was very nice to give up a rook with check. And like I said, after the game, after the match, Aronian mentioned this Spassky against Bronstein game, where Bronstein played e2 to get rid of the pawn, take the queen away from the battery, but Spassky played knight d6. So Bronstein could have taken the rook with check, but he didn't. He comes under heavy fire. I'm not sure about the objective evaluation, but the key thing is that Aronian remembered this idea and thought it was kind of similar. But okay, on to the match again. Aronian missed a great chance there. Like a sitter, as we sometimes call it in football. So now he has to find other avenues to find the win for the day. Now he has the black pieces. Radjabov with white. Let's actually switch that. Radjabov with white. And now again d4. And Levon goes away from the Vienna that he played on day 1. And we go for the Grunwald. Bishop f4. c5. e3. Knight c6. And actually, according to my database, this is a novelty. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but it seems like the move order is a little bit different in this one. But the position type is quite well known. Queen takes d5, queen f3 now by Radjabov. Queen d7, bishop b5. We have some trades. Knight f3, bishop g7. So white has a very nice structure, kind of a structural advantage, but black on the other hand does have the bishop pair. And here Aronian gives it up, plays bishop takes e5, followed by f6, and yeah, basing his winning attempts on the bishop on d3, which is covering b1, which means that black will be able to put something on the b file. First he has to avoid, you know, this bishop, but Aronian was banking on this being a good factor here. Rook d2, covering the second rank, and actually being first on the b file. An important maneuver here by Radjabov. Rook h to d8, e4, so good central pawns here for Radjabov. c5. Aronian tries to break them up, and successfully, but Radjabov can hold down to the pawn, at least for the time being. Another central break, breaking up white central completely, but at the cost of a pawn. So let's see how this develops. f4, bishop takes, so now he gets the c5 pawn, but he gave up the f pawn. Rook b5, trying to get some inroads on the queen side, but Radjabov just defends. He plays a3 and defends the pawn. Looks passive, but his position is in the match is such that Aronian has to find wins. So for the time being, he's just defending, but in defending, he can now start pushing his maturity on the king side. And that's what he does. Calmly pushes. And eventually, we're going to have a trade. Rook a2. King goes back and forth. There's really no active plan here for black. And now Radjabov switches the bishop over to the defensive role. So now the rook can roam around, and it does so with rook b2 first. Bishop c5, hitting the pawn on b5. King d5. And yeah, for the time being we can't take because of king c6 with a double attack. Bishop e3, but now the pawn is attacked. King c6. Rook has to go back to defend the pawn. But Radjabov has tricked Aronian because now this pawn is hanging. We have a trade. And now all of a sudden Radjabov is up 2 pawns. Counterplay by Aronian. But does it arrive in time? He manages to lock in the rook. But king f3 and the bishop is covering the queening square. White's pawns are actually very strong. And a4 now, king takes b4, a5. Looks like Radjabov is just in time. He's going to stop the king from coming to b2. Aronian has to go for counter here to attack the bishop. But Radjabov pushes. So this is just not in time. First we have a little dance here. Repeat if you can. But then he goes to h6 and the white pawn is going to queen first. Black queens, but a final winning tactic here by Radjabov. Rook takes b1, hitting the king and the queen. And Aronian resigned because if he takes, there's going to be a long distance check here. King moves and we pick up the queen. So well done indeed by Radjabov, who now leads 1.5 on day 2. So Aronian needs to win the remaining 2 games. Simple. If he can do that, he will force a tiebreak. So he has white in the 3rd game. Must-win situation for Aronian. We again have the Italian. He was kind of successful in the first one, so why not? Bishop g5. Queen e7 now. Unusual, not castling yet. Bishop b6, knight b2, bishop e6, b4, and now finally castles. So well-known opening. Actually, bishop b6 on move 7 was, according to my database, a novelty. So even in such a well-known opening, the moves can be novelties, but the position and the piece placements are usually the same. So theory is not as important in these lines. Bishop d5, h6, and again we have this question to take or not to take. To take or not to take, that is the question. And again, Aronian opts not to take. He takes on e6 first. And now it's just ridiculous to take because there will not be any pin here. So the bishop retreats. Again, the knight maneuvers. It's eyeing this square again, just like in the first game. We have to keep the bishop. It's a strong piece. Knight e3, c6. Again, Aronian centralizes, so kind of standard moves. Like I said, b5, c4. And here, Radjabov decides to take on e3. Figures that, yeah, white is not jumping into this square now, so we can jump into f4. h3, knight h5, rook c1, and now he jumps into f4. And Aronian decides to play connect 5 here. Not often you see 5 pawns on the 4th rank, so should be a bonus point for that. Come on, a nice setup here by Aronian, but can he make something of it? Rook d1, a lot of maneuvering here. AP, AP, CP, CP, and queen c6. Trying to hit the pawn, but Radjabov, as always, just defends. Queen d7, rook e to d8, queen to g4. Now offering the queen trade, and we have it, but not after a minor piece trade, followed by the queen trade and rook a3. So still equal material, and Radjabov is still solid. He exchanges a pair of rooks. We have another trade, h4, king f6. Anticipating h5 and knight takes e5, so now the king covers. Can white make anything of this, if this is something at all? Rook d7, but counterplay, rook a4. Aronian takes on e5. King back to f6 before we take on a b4. So again, equal material, 4 points each. Radjabov starts pushing the b pawn. Aronian comes in with the king, takes on f4. He's up a pawn. Is there something happening? No, Teimour has found an excellent defense. Well, his defense is actually offense, because he is threatening checkmate with e5. The king has no square. This is a big threat. King is covering this. White has to do something about it. First of all, a check, but it does nothing because we're still threatening this square. So the only way to get out of this is to play e5. But now we can simply take the pawn. And at this stage, Radjabov let out some emotion, pumping the fist on the webcam, because he knew at this stage the title was his. And indeed, nothing to be done for Aronian. This pawn is going to drop here, rook takes e5. And they simply traded the pawns here, rook e4, and we're left with the kings. 2 kings, but in the end, there was only 1 king, Teimour Radjabov. A well-deserved victory for Teimour. Yeah, one of the best of his career. Of course, the World Cup remains his main achievement, but a very good tournament win here for Teimour Radjabov, and he was very emotional after it and very happy. And yeah, he mentioned that he was very impressed with Aronian's play in the tournament, and that his strategy in the final was to get it into a tiebreak. I mean, Aronian was playing so well, he felt his best chance was in the tiebreaks. So he played perhaps a little dry, he admitted that, but he said, I mean, he's a professional chess player. He's trying to win the tournament by any means possible. If it means that he has to play what people may perceive as boring chess, I mean, so be it. He's trying to win, and in the end he won, and deservedly so. So congratulations to Teimour Radjabov. Hope you enjoyed my little coverage, and it's on to other things. We have some patterns to look at, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thanks for your attention. Bye bye.